But let's not get too bogged down with the younger son's attitude and behavior, because there's another son in the parable, the older son, the one who many of us imagine as being a bit too self-righteous, the one who feels that some people just shouldn't be allowed into the house, the one who, if we were to draw parallels, would be the Pharisees in Jesus' day and the religious right in our own day. Those sanctimonious rule followers who think that following the letter of the law will get you into heaven. But the older son's response was understandable, you know. He was right, and he had every reason to be angry. He had stayed by the father even when the younger son had abandoned the old man. It's not like he had not wanted to see the world, but he knew he had responsibilities. Rather than be his father's source of pain and heartache, he stayed behind and fulfilled all the duties of a good son. And yet his father had not once thrown a celebration on his behalf. By all rights, he was justified in his anger and his resentment. He was entitled to his grudge because the father simply wasn't being fair at all. If on one hand there are people who see God as the source of all good things, there are others who see God as the one who should be obeyed. And they do. They obey God. Sometimes grudgingly, sometimes cheerfully, but they obey. And there should be a reward for that sort of obedience, shouldn't there? And that reward certainly goes by the name of heaven. There's heaven and there's hell. Heaven is for those people who have followed the rules, the people who have obeyed God, people who have endured hardships and even persecutions in life, all for the sake of obedience to God. And hell is reserved for the prodigal children, those who have abandoned God and squandered away their inheritance. But in this story, the prodigal son who has squandered away his inheritance is the one who seems to be rewarded. And by all accounts, the elder son had every reason to be angry. I don't see myself as a religious goody two-shoes. Jesus spent a goodly portion of his ministry coloring outside the religious lines, and I like to do the same thing. But like the elder son, sometimes I look around, and it seems that things just aren't fair. For instance, there are colleagues in ministry who don't work as hard as I do. And yet they're rewarded with a much larger salary, a filled sanctuary on Sunday mornings, and an abundance of ministry volunteers and paid staff. By all accounts, I am long overdue for a reward. Maybe you feel the same way sometimes. Maybe you sometimes wonder how much more hardship you must endure before God decides to smile on you. But let's return to our parable. A parable in which we are presented with two sons, a couple of young men who had grown up under the same roof, who saw their father in two almost diametrically opposed ways. One saw him as a source of blessings, and the other saw him as the one who should be obeyed. And I almost tend to believe that what we have within our Bible is an abridged version of the parable. I'll bet the father had other children. There was probably a daughter who saw him as distant and inaccessible. And there was most likely a toddler who saw him as a source of entertainment and joy. There was no mother mentioned in the parable. Maybe she died during childbirth. So there might even be another child, a daughter maybe, who saw the father as a surrogate mother, relating to her in all the ways that a mother would relate to her daughter. But here's the point of the parable. It's not that some kids are behaved better than others. It's not that free-spirited children are rewarded and rule followers are not. The point of the parable is that no matter how different the children may have seen their father, they were all loved and they were all welcome at the dinner table. You see, when it comes to grace, accounting goes out the window. And when it comes to love, what's fair and what's not fair doesn't matter anymore. Everyone is welcome. There's room at the table for everyone, no matter how eccentric their views of the parent may be. And God desperately wants everyone to come in and eat together. Everyone is welcome. In the end, neither son had an accurate perception of the father, but both were welcome at the table. And no matter how different our views of God, in the end, none of us has an entirely accurate perception of God. We like to think that we've got the corner on the market or the inside scoop, but we don't. And that just doesn't matter. What matters is that you and I both are welcome at God's banquet table of love. And what's more, all of those others who disagree with our image of God are also welcome. And may we never forget it. Amen.